Thanks for tuning in to Small Steps to Self-Love. My name is Shelby Leigh, and I am a mental health poet and author. If you are here because you read my poetry or you came from one of my social media platforms, hi, thanks for being here and listening. And if you don't know who I am, welcome. In this episode, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me and my journey of self-love and why I am so passionate about this topic. And I'll also be answering some questions from some of my readers. So thank you if you submitted a question on Instagram. So to kick off the first episode, I wanted to actually start by reading you a poem. So for those of you watching, you'll see I'm holding up my book. It's called Changing with the Tides, and I'm going to read you page 105. And if you're in a place where it's safe to do so, like you're not driving, for example, go ahead and close your eyes while I read this. I lost who I was. Forgot myself in the hands of someone who didn't know how to treat me. I'm slowly undoing their devastation, unfolding my corners and picking up the pieces that were chiseled away. I lost who I was, or maybe a better word is misplaced, because I found myself again. And this time, like a glistening shell found hidden in the sand, I am placing myself in my hands and never letting go. So, as you get to know me more through my poems and through this podcast, I write a lot about losing yourself, finding love for yourself, like this poem. And I love sharing this poem because I often get a mixed reaction where some people imagine another person that this poem made them think of, or they think of a person that they felt that they lost themselves in. And other times I've heard people say that they thought of themselves, that they didn't know how to treat and care for themselves, and it caused them to feel lost. And it's so true that poetry can be interpreted in very different ways, in whatever way you need to interpret it. And whatever interpretation you had is valid and true for where you are in your life. So, whichever of these applies to you, I want you to remember that last line: I'm placing myself in my hands and never letting go. And know that it's a long journey that we are going to go on together through this podcast. So I wanted to share a bit about my journey because this podcast is an example of how far I've come, and it's something that I never thought that I would do. There isn't one specific moment I can pinpoint when I became very fearful of other people's judgment, I guess. It was gradual for me, but there was a point growing up that I became really shy and worried what other people thought about me. And it definitely impacted making friends and how I talk to people. And even when I started sharing my work online, I didn't want any judgment. Who does, right? So I chose actually to write anonymously for a while and not tell anyone who I was, not tell anyone in my life that I was writing and sharing my work. But I always wanted to be a writer. So even though it was terrifying, I took the leap to start sharing my work online. And then I took the leap to start sharing more about myself and realizing that I needed to connect with people and I wanted to connect with people. And it's been really daily work over the past 7 or so years to get to a point where I feel good and comfortable enough about who I am and what I do, enough to use my voice now and start a podcast and all of that. So if my younger self saw me now, as someone who hated any form of public speaking or attention on me, especially in the high school days, who hated their voice, worried constantly about what people were thinking, to now sharing my work to thousands of people each day, shaking off the silly negative comments I sometimes get, although they're rare and I'm very fortunate for that. I think my younger self would be in shock. And some days I wish I could see her face. So I want to end these episodes with a small step, like the title of this podcast. Now, this time I'm going to put it halfway through since I'm going to transition to a Q&A after this. Whether you choose to write with this small step, like it's a journal prompt, or just think about it throughout your day, it's up to you. But today's self-love step is going to be, what would your younger self think if they saw you now? So you can think about this from your younger self 3 years ago, or 10 years ago, or decades ago, however you want to interpret it. I know it can be hard to avoid negativity, especially when we're kind of in our own minds and keeping it to ourselves. I know there's someone listening who might have immediately thought, my younger self would be disappointed in me or they wouldn't like me. And if that's you, I get it. There are some days where I feel that way too. But I want to ask you to focus on one positive. So, what is one thing that your younger self would love about you if they saw you now? If you're listening, think about it or take a few moments to journal with it. And I'm going to switch gears to a Q&A. I probably won't do questions every episode, but for the first one, I thought it would be a good way to tell you more about me and learn what you want to know. So I asked my readers on TikTok and Instagram and then picked a few to answer. And many of these are going to be writing related. But the first question is from Jules, and they asked, "What inspires you?" Which I love starting with this type of question about what inspires my writing and what I do. And for me, I am inspired most when it comes to writing, at least, by my own past experiences. I write a lot about my own mental health journey often. So, to get inspired to write, I'll read through either previous journal entries of mine, but I also love reading other poets too. Going to bookstores or libraries, pulling a stack of poetry books to flip through always helps me feel really inspired. Similarly, Caitlin asked me what my writing process looks like, and I actually don't have a set routine that I follow or a set process, which I know a lot of writers have. So maybe I'll get there one day, but I actually am pretty free and open about when and how I write. I always write with a pen for poetry. I just find it flows so much better than when I type poetry. And I also like silence. So writing in my home or in a library are usually where I get the best writing done. I'm not really a music person while I write. I do love music other times though. And then once I'm done with a writing session, normally I'll have a few pages of writing or more. And then I'll type them up and do some editing as I type. But I don't typically do any big edits for a while. I like to let it sit and come back to it before I make any changes. Alyssa asked, "How does poetry help your mental health?" And I love this question because I am a very big believer that writing is so helpful for our minds and our mental health. And I'll definitely be talking about this in future episodes, but writing is a way to let out everything that we have bundled up inside of us. All the feelings, all the emotions, we can let it out on the page and it can be kept for just us, or it can be thrown away and let go. So, writing for your mental health doesn't mean you have to share it with anyone if you don't want to. And you don't have to use fancy metaphors or techniques to use writing to benefit you. If you are someone who is in their head a lot, you're holding a lot of anxiety or stress or anger, really anything, even if you're feeling quite happy, which is great, I recommend writing and noting why you're feeling that way and letting out anything that you're holding in. And the final question that I'm going to answer for today is from Cheyenne, who asked, "What are some goals you hope to accomplish before the new year?" It is the end of July as I record this, and I am a very goal oriented person. So I do have quite a few goals for my writing and for my business as well, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. One is that my next book comes out in January 2023, and I'm super excited. It's already available for pre order. It's called Girl Made of Glass. So for the rest of the year, I have some goals and ideas around promoting that book launch. And then I also have a poetry club. It's a membership where we do workshops each month and support each other, as many of our members are writing poetry books and publishing or just want to become better poets. And my goal is to get to 100 members of that group. We are at just over 70 as I record this. And finally, I would love to finish my fourth book, which is in the works. I am about one third of the way done. So I have some work to do, but I think it's some of my best writing yet. So I'm really excited for that. So that is all for the first episode. Thank you so much for your questions. Thanks for listening to episode one. I'm so excited to continue chatting with you in future episodes. If you have any questions for me or topic requests, please leave a comment or a review or send me a message on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for listening to Small Steps to Self Love, and I'll talk to you next time.